Hello and welcome back to Homebrew EDH, where I take you through my personal commander decks, how they work, and how they win. This episode is Tayam, Luminous, Enigma. This Abzan deck loves creatures, graveyards, and counters. With that, let's get into the episode. Tayam costs 1 white, black, green for a 3/3 Nightmare Beast that reads each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional vigilance counter on it. Not just with vigilance, but a vigilance counter. The ability counters were introduced in Ikoria in early 2020, I believe. It also has an ability that you can pay 3, remove 3 counters. Doesn't say what kind of counters, just any counters. -1/-1, +1/+1, abilities. I don't know what other kind of counters there are. Divinity counters, I guess, from way back when. Stuff like that. So remove 3 counters from among creatures you control. Put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Then return a permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. I took this in a very creature-heavy direction, although it does say any permanent, so I've got a ton of cheap creatures, lots of graveyard recursion, board wipes, and ways to put cards into the graveyard. First up, we're going to want to put cards into our graveyard. Some easy ways to do that are Grisly Salvage, Discerning Taste, and Glowspore Shaman. Grisly Salvage is a black and a green for an instant. Reveal the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a creature or land card from among them into your hand. Put the rest into the graveyard. Discerning Taste is 2 and a black for a sorcery. Look at the top 4 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the rest into your graveyard. Plus, we gain life equal to the greatest power among creatures put into our graveyard this way. And Glowspore Shaman is a green and a black for a 3/1 elf shaman that when it enters the battlefield puts the top 3 cards of our library into our graveyard, and we can put a land from our graveyard on top of our library, which will help if we happen to run into a mana problem. Now, to avoid mana problems, we do run some ramp because we have green. Some I felt like pointing out that you won't see very often other than Dark Ritual would be Verdant Mastery and Verdant Eidolon. So Verdant Mastery is 5 and a green for sorcery. That reads you may pay 3 and a green other than pay this spell's mana cost. Search your library for up to 4 basic land cards and reveal them. Put one of them onto the battlefield tapped under opponent's control if the 3 and a green cost was paid. Put 2 of them onto the battlefield tapped under your control and the rest into your hand, then shuffle your library. Dark Ritual is 1 black, add 3 black at instant speed. And Verdant Eidolon is 3 and a green for a 2/2 spirit that has an ability to pay a green, sacrifice it, and add 3 mana of any one color, and whenever you cast a multicolored spell, you may return Verdant Eidolon from your graveyard to your hand. Speaking of putting cards into our hand, we're going to want to draw some cards at some point this game, rather than just the first one each turn. So I run cards like Argul's Bloodfast, Soul of the Harvest, and Morbid Opportunist. Argul's Bloodfast is 1 and a black for a legendary enchantment that has an ability to pay 1 and a black, pay 2 life, and draw a card. At the beginning of your upkeep, if you have 5 or less life, we can transform it, but we're not worried about that because this deck loves to gain life, so that won't be too much of an issue unless we're facing some kind of aggro deck. Soul of the Harvest is 4 green for a 6/6 elemental with trample that reads whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. Morbid Opportunist is 2 and a black for a 1/3 human rogue that reads whenever 1 or more other creatures die, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn, so you can do it on your opponent's turn too if they happen to sacrifice a creature or go to combat and something would die there. You can still draw a card off of that, but only once a turn. Now, I mentioned life gain, so I figured I would bring up something we can do with it. Resolute Rider, Deathless Knight, and Zulaport Cutthroat all have some kind of life gain aspect tied to them. So Resolute Rider is 4 hybrid Orzhov, so any combination of white and black mana, for a 4/2 human knight where we can pay 2 hybrid Orzhov to give it lifelink until end turn, or 3 hybrid Orzhov, and it will gain indestructible. If you pay 5, you can give it both if you want to, if you have that much spare mana. Deathless Knight is 4 hybrid Golgari, so any combination of green and black mana, for a 4/2 skeleton knight with haste that reads whenever you gain life for the first time each turn, return Deathless Knight from your graveyard to your hand. And Zulaport Cutthroat is 1 and a black for a 1/1 human rogue ally that reads whenever Zulaport Cutthroat or another creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. And now we're going to give some examples of creatures that fall under the Tayam ability to where they cost 3 or less. So Direfleet Hoarder is 1 and a black, Splinter Fright is 2 and a green, and Tormented Soul is just 1 black. Direfleet Hoarder is a 2/1 for 2. When it dies, we create a treasure. Splinter Fright is 2 and a green for a star with trample, which power and toughness are equal to the number of creature cards in our graveyard, so it'll go up or down depending on where we are in the game. That also reads at the beginning of your upkeep, put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. And Tormented Soul, sorry if that's hard to read, the foiling is kind of weird with this lighting. Tormented Soul is 1 black for a 1/1 that is unblockable, but it cannot block. Now, we're also going to follow the Tayam theme here with these next 3 with the counters ability, so we have the counters to remove to activate the mana ability there. So, Ivy Lane Denizen, Ajani's Pridemate, and Algae Gariel, that's how I'm going to go with it, all put counters on things for different reasons. So Ivy Lane Denizen is 3 and a green for a 2/3 elf warrior. Whenever another green creature enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. Ajani's Pridemate is 1 and a white for a 2/2 cat soldier. Whenever you gain life, you may put a +1/+1 counter on it. And Algae Gariel, 3 and a green for a 1/1 crocodile with Shroud. That reads, whenever another creature dies, you may put a +1/+1 counter on it. All of which can be removed when we go to activate Tayam's ability. Next up, we have the Graveyard Recursion theme with Command the Dreadhorde, Can't Stay Away, and Revelark. So Command the Dreadhorde is 4 black for a sorcery. Choose any number of target creature and or planeswalker cards in graveyards, anybody's graveyard. Command the Dreadhorde deals damage to you equal to the total converted mana cost of those cards. Put them onto the battlefield under your control. If we gain enough life with this deck, we can do some pretty devastating things with that card. Can't Stay Away is a white and a black for a sorcery. Return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains if this creature would die, exile it instead. We can also flash this back for 3 white-black. And Revelark is 4 and a white for a 4/3 elemental with flying. When it leaves the battlefield, return up to 2 target creature cards with power 2 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, or we can evoke it for 5 and a white. And before we wrap up today, we are going to go over the driving force behind this whole deck is the high amount of board wipes. Cards like Citywide Bust, Ondu Inversion, and Kaya's Wrath will certainly help fill up our graveyards and our opponents so that we can use all of our cards to the best of their ability. Citywide Bust is 1 white for a sorcery that reads destroy all creatures with toughness 4 or greater. Ondu Inversion is a straight up board nuke with 6 white sorcery, destroy all non-land permanents. And Kaya's Wrath is a white, black sorcery for destroy all creatures. You gain life equal to the number of creatures you controlled that were destroyed this way. I sincerely hope you enjoyed today's episode of Homebrew EDH. If you did, go ahead and leave a like. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this. As always, the deck list will be in the description with all the cards I did not include in this video. Constructive feedback and deck suggestions are always welcome in the comments. And until I see you guys in the next one, take it easy and enjoy your day.